there, nice to see you again. Welcome back to my series of watercolour painting tutorials. We're going to look today at doing a picture of a ballet dancer, like this one, using cling film for the effects of the skirt. We're going to start by drawing her out, then we apply the watercolour washes, and then we apply the cling film and we let it dry. There's a natural tea break there, you can go for a cup of tea and let it dry. And then we'll come back and start to work on her and build the rest of the picture up. Okay, I'm going to start now by doing the drawing. Okay, I have previously done the drawing and made a cheat sheet up. I'd always advise to do the drawing on a scrap piece of paper first, so you don't damage your watercolour paper when you're rubbing out. So you can either draw it yourself, or you can download a PDF off my website, which will give you this picture for you. You can scribble on the back with a soft pencil, put it down onto your watercolour paper, and this is Bockingford 425 watercolour paper, and then gently go back over the lines to leave an impression on your drawing. What I'm not doing is putting this area in, around by the thighs here, because if you press very heavily on your pencil around this area, you'll still see it through the watercolours, and we don't really want to do that. So we want to keep all the lines quite light. So we've now got a half-drawn ballet dancer on the watercolour paper. So that looks quite nice. I would just soften with a little rubber or even a bit of blue tack, just soften out any hard lines on there. You don't really want hard lines showing through the finished watercolour paper, or the watercolour painting, I should say. So we just want to make sure that everything's correct before we start and just know where you're going with it. We're going to use cling film to produce the effects of the skirt. So what I'd suggest you do is get a piece of cling film. It's just ordinary plastic cling film. And before we start, we have to put it in the position of where we're going to want it later. Cling film has to go onto watercolour painting while the paint is still wet, while the paper's still wet, while the paint's still wet. Otherwise it doesn't have any effect, and then you have to leave it to dry. So you don't want to get in a position of, oh, I don't know where to put it while it's soaking wet. So we're going to make a little gathered skirt for her before we start putting the paint on, and then we know exactly where we're going to put it. So I'd gather it around by the waist, and then just get some nice little crinkles in it, and this will form the patterns in the skirt. And then I'm just going to lift that up and put it to one side where I know where I've put it. So I'm just moving it over a little bit so I know where it's going to go. I'm then going to mix all the colours up I'm going to use. So before you wet the paper, make sure that you've mixed all your colours up, and you can choose any colours you want to for this. This one I did originally was in ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, a little bit of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson mixed together, a little bit of weak burnt sienna around the outside as well to match the arms and bring all the colours into it. But you can do any colours you want to. This is done with rose madders and dark sign violets and things like that. This is Prussian blues and lemon yellows, and of course they all have slightly different effects with the cling film. But what you will need to do is mix up the colours first with some water. And I always have 2 pots of water, one for putting water onto the paper, one for cleaning my brush as I go. So I'm just going to mix the colours up now with a large brush and some water. I'm going to use my nice clean palette to mix in. As you can see, I never get round to cleaning my palettes properly. They're always disgustingly dirty, but I find that just revitalise colours and they're nice to use again. So that's a bit of alizarin crimson. You want a couple of shades of that, one really strong one and one really weak one. So I'm just mixing up a little bit of a stronger mix in the top of the palette. While I've got that on my brush, I'm going to use another area here. So I have purpley colour. So that's alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue gives me a little bit of purpley colour. I like to put the paint in first and dilute to taste. So some people put the water in first. I don't. I'm going to do that a little bit stronger. I do it this way around. And again, I'm just going to have a puddle now of ultramarine blue. Nice and bright down here. What you want to aim for is having weaker colours around the lady and then stronger colours round by the skirt. So the same colours again, but a lot stronger. And then I want a little bit of, it's going to be grubby, I'll just clean my brush, bit of kitchen roll. Let's take that out again, because I want a nice bit of burnt sienna in there to match the skin tone I'm going to use later. Just a little bit of that to bring the colours in. That should do for that one. And now I'm ready to start. So I'm going to take my mop brush, which is a nice big soft brush just for wetting the paper. Clean water. I'm going to wet this all over. I might just avoid the front of her chest here because that's got to be left quite light. That's where the light's catching her. I did try and avoid the face in the beginning, but it's just too fiddly and it's fine. Go over her arms, over the rest of it. Take the water off the edge of the paper as well, so always wet beyond where you want it to go. Okay, so I'm just wetting right down off the paper. Just leave the front of the chest, carefully down the front of the chest. Paint will always run and try and get to the edge of the water, so if you want to stop anywhere, just make sure you've got a nice line there. Okay, so that's staying glossy wet. Hopefully you can see that's, oops, you can see that shiny. So it's nice and shiny and wet all over. Always have your board slightly tilted so the paint runs down the paper. Right, so swap to my big brush. Let's give it a quick clean. And then I'm going to go into these colours, starting with the weaker ones first. And this is just a bit of weak burnt sienna. That surprisingly is a weak burnt sienna. I'm just putting that round the outside, just randomly to give a little bit of background scene to it really. And then I'm going to go in with the weaker colours first. Have a little bit of this Elysian Crimson, starting from her middle outwards really, over the arms, into the skirt, just vaguely like that. And then the same with a little bit of the weak purpley colour perhaps, a bit of that. This you want to leave a bit of the colour as if she's moving and giving a bit of life and movement to the picture. So a bit of colouring into that is fine. And then a bit of the blue just straight in. I don't bother cleaning my brush in between these, just go for it. And already it's looking quite bright and fun. So now I'm going to go in with the stronger colours. So a bit of the stronger Elysian Crimson, start from the waist outwards. Don't take it too far out. Again, a stronger purpley colour. Ooh, that's nice there. And then stronger blues. If you put it on your paper and it goes ouch, it's probably about right. It's got to go in while this is staying wet. So that's about enough paint, I think, onto there. So I'm going to get the cling film, my little pre-crinkled dress, and just lay it on the middle there and just let it drop down into its natural little crinkles. So you can start to see what the patterning is going to be like on this one. I'm not going to push it right down so it comes off the paper, perhaps peel it back a little bit round by her feet so you don't get too many crinkles coming in that far. Just touch it down and then you have to leave it to dry. Nothing you can do with it while it's wet. You have to leave it to dry naturally. If you try it with a hairdryer, it will just blow the cling film off and you won't get any patterning. So patience, compulsory cup of tea there, I'm afraid. Okay, I forgot to say before we pause to let it dry out, make sure you take the little puddles off around the outside with a bit of tissue, otherwise you'll get cauliflowers running back in again. The top part's dry, this is still damp, so the top part's dry up here, so we can start working on this bit, leaving the cling film in place. That just gives it a little bit longer to dry. If you want to see whether it's dry or not, just if you move it and the paint still moves underneath there, it's still wet, so you have to leave it for a little bit longer. But we can peel it back from her arms and her face and start working on that area. So we're going to use a small brush now, this is a 6 round. And we're going to use the burnt sienna colour and a little bit of purple, the colour we've got in the dress here, a little bit of the blue and the red mixed together for the shading. So first of all, we're going to load it with a weakish burnt sienna colour. And we'll try this arm first of all. So you're just going to load a small brush with the burnt sienna colour, carefully down her fingers, just make them very fine there for the fingers, and just down her arm. Hopefully you can see that's a little puddle I'm keeping in there. We've got to keep this wet so that it blends in. Okay, so now we're going to do the skin tone on her arm and the shading onto her arms. So we're going to use a small brush, 6 round, and we're going to put on a blob of watercolour. You've got to keep this bit wet to allow the shadows to blend in. So hopefully you can see that's a little puddle I'm putting on here, and just dragging it down her arm here. So I'm dragging a puddle. As soon as that starts to dry out, I'll put another blob of paint on to keep it wet. It stays wetter longer on the better quality watercolour paper. The cheaper, the thinner the watercolour paper, the more quickly it dries out. So just bring that down, and then before it's completely finished, I'm just going to dry my brush, lift out any extra puddles. And I'm also just going to lighten this edge just by taking my brush down, and already she's starting to get a little bit of shape into that arm. And then before this is dry completely, tiny little bit of the purple colour. It is just the tip of the brush into a little dry bit of the paint there. And we're just going to put the shadow in a little bit more. A little bit of shadow down the fingers, down the back of the arm here to give her the shaping. And just letting it blend in. If it's too dry, it'll go hard and stripy. So we just want to let it blur a little bit to give her a little bit of shading around her muscles there. A little bit of shaping. It's quite important just to have a little bit of stronger paint on to put it into the damp paper. If it's too weak, you'll get these white marks in there and cauliflowers and things. And I'll just tickle that in. I'll leave that one to dry. So while that's drying, we can do the other one. Clean the brush, dry it into the burnt sienna. And again, same sort of thing on here. Carefully down her fingers. You don't want her looking like rubber gloves. So we're just putting this blob of watercolour paint onto her hand here. And again, hopefully you can see that's shiny and glossy. Bringing it all the way down the arm. And then while that's still shiny and glossy like that, we'll touch in the shadow colour. So that's filled in. Lift out any little blobs of puddles of paint that are still left there. So you're just getting an even coating of colour across there. Going to go in with this stronger, drier bit of purple colour now for the shading. And that's, most of this arm is going to be in shadow because it's behind her. So again, a little bit of paint. Just tickle it into that damp paint there so it blends. So if it's dry, you'll get hard stripy lines with it, and then if it's wet, it should just bleed in and blend nicely, and then it starts to come back into the light somewhere about here. So we have a little bit of muscle tone here, a little bit under her armpits. Careful of that, you don't want to give her a hairy armpit, and probably leave it something like that for that one. We'll do the face. Don't try and get the very dark bits into her face with the hair and everything straight away, but we'll just put all this tone onto it first and the shading onto it. We're going to put this puddle of burnt sienna over her hair as well. When you're doing watercolours, don't paint all around the edge first and fill it in. Just fill it in as you go. This means you don't get this double line around everything. So just bring it in, down, a little puddle of paint. So this is still staying glossy wet. If it dries out, just put wait until it's dry and then put a little bit of water on to re-wet it again. Shadowy colour onto her hair. This isn't the final colour. It's just a little bit of tone onto here. So we can leave those to dry. Let's clean the brush. And now this should be completely dry. Yes, I'm moving it and there's no movement of the paint, so I can just take that off, just peel it off. You can see already you've got a lovely patterning appearing on there. If you need to, just dry it with a hairdryer then, just to take the little surplus bits of paint out of that. But it now means we can start working on the feet. So same sort of thing with the feet. And where you stop the leg or where you end the leg is going to be entirely up to you. It's going to be where your bit of cling film finishes. If it comes right out here, you stop the foot there. If it's further back, you paint the leg a little bit higher up. Same sort of thing with the feet. We're just going to put the shading onto it. So I'm just going to go on with a little bit of weak burnt sienna, a reddish brown colour, over a shoe, over a leg. And I forgot to do something first, and that was to clean a little bit of clean water where you want it to fade away. Just dot that onto the skirt there, and I'll continue bringing that colour up to where the water is, and then as soon as I touch that water, I'm going to stop and just let it tickle into that water, which means it will just fade back into the skirt. So it's just to make it look like it's blending in and disappearing away into the skirt there. Again, add the shadows, a little bit around the toe. Perhaps the underside of the leg. Just to give that a bit of shaping. It's not the colour of the shoe, we're going to pop that on in a moment and leave that one. So it's the same with this one. I should do it the right way round first of all. Put the water on where I want it to fade away into the dress. So put the water on there just in the area of the leg. And then a little bit of burnt sienna. I've just run out, so to mix a little bit more. And then we'll bring that up. Bring that up from the foot. A little bit on the weak side there, and then as soon as I touch it into that water, I'm going to stop. So it just, the water's here and I'm just letting the paint trickle up into that naturally. And again, take the puddles out of it now. Just dry my brush, take the tip of the brush in and just take any puddles out. Then before it's dry, a little bit of the stronger purpley colour, be the underside of the leg here, just into that damp paint for the shading. So that's all the first base layers of the skin tone put on, so that's pretty well finished for the arms, the feet. We will put the shoes onto here, so hopefully that's dry. We can go back and put her features onto her face now. I'm going to stick with this purpley colour for her hair, a little bit more purpley colour. Because it's going over this browny colour, it will look a browny grey colour. If you don't like that, you can obviously use ultramarine blue and burnt umber and make it a bit darker. But this is just onto the dry paper. And just bringing that round, just to give her a little bit of hair. Onto that, a touch for her eye, even smaller touch for an eyebrow. Be careful now, just a tiny little touch for the mouth, and that's it for the features. Oh, perhaps a little touch inside the ear to give that a bit more shape. Minimal lines onto the face here, otherwise she does look a bit, it can go horribly wrong with that part. So now we've done that, we can start to work on the bodice and perhaps put a waistband onto the dress to make that look like it's part of this. I've just realised here I've overlapped that. I wasn't careful enough when I put the water on. So I'm going to rescue that little bit just by lifting it out, just wetting it, rubbing it with the brush so it's clean water on. And I just dab that with a bit of clean tissue. And just takes that line out. So I can decide on the colour of the top now, and I want some of the colours which are in the dress really. Perhaps I'll use the red for the top and the blue for the waistband. So my colours are there mixed up, ready and waiting. So this time, because it's a slightly bigger area, I'm going to wet it first, all the way across the top here. This will just allow it to blend a little bit more. With the small areas, you can just wet it with the first colour. With this, because it's bigger, you need to wet the paper first. Again, just take the puddles out of it. So it's damp, not soaking wet. And now I'm going to pop in the red colour for a top. It should just spread nice and evenly across here. And don't paint all around the edges first and then fill it in, work from the top downwards. Your board's sloping, so it should run down nicely. It's a bit stronger down the bottom here. And same sort of thing as I did with the arm, just dry my brush, run it down the front to give me the light part where the light's catching it. So that makes it lighter, but not bright whites. It's just giving it that nice lighter look to it. And then stronger red, a little bit more of the alizarin crimson, a little bit stronger down here, and perhaps even a little bit of the purpley colour to give her the shading into the body. Blend that in. You can mess and blend with it while it's still wet. So we've got to let that bit dry before we put the waistband on. So while that's drying, we can come and do the shoes. Pick a colour. Again, you either have it the same colour as the waistband or the same colour as the dress. I'll stick to the reddish colour for the shoes. And the same sort of thing now, just straight onto dry paper. You've already put the shading in. So it's just a little bit of red around there, a few little hints of the crisscross bits for a lace-ups on there. Same on this one. Just the red onto the dry paper. A few little, not sure how they go exactly, but something like that will probably do for that one. Oh, look at that, that's run a little bit too much. Let me just dry that out a bit. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and let this dry. You could use a hairdryer on it here before I put the waistband on. Okay. Okay, so make sure that this is dry because we want to put the waistband on here. So if you need to dry it with a hairdryer, you can do. So I'm going to pick a colour that's in the dress here, and I'll probably pick the blue colour to put the waistband on with. And this time I'm just going to get a little bit of clean water. I want it to fade into this dress, and I'm going to really put quite a few blobs of water onto there, quite a way away. Don't rub it, otherwise you'll lose that lovely patterning. So I'm just touching on some bits of water below the waistband so it just blends into it a little bit. Take a little bit of the blue colour, or whichever colour you want to use. Paint that onto the dry part, down her waist there, and then touch it into that water. So the water's down here, so what I'm trying to do is make sure that the paint can't run as far as the edge of the water, so it blends in and sits neatly onto the dress and becomes part of it. And that's the dress done. There's just one little bit we've got to do, and that's put a bit of shadow down here. And that's finished. I don't like that bit there. I'm just going to lift that out again. And that's just put a little bit of shadow down the bottom here. So again, I'm going to swap to my bigger brush now. Weaken the purple colour down. So very weak, a little bit of water in with the paint so it's not too strong. You can always make it stronger, but it's difficult to make it darker again. And it is just going to be a couple of little streaks. If she's touching the ground, I'd make sure it started at the toe, but I think she's still in mid-air at this point. So I'm going to have a little bit of shadow below her foot and below the dress. Just a couple of little squiggles down here. Again, just take the puddle out of it. If you want to, you could put a little colour of the dress, especially if you're doing it a different colour, just to give it a little bit of change of light in there. And that's it. So there we go. That's how you paint this little ballet dancer. Nice simple steps, nice easy picture to paint. You can do it in whatever colours you want to. You can choose your own colours. This is Prussian blue and lemon yellow. Same sort of thing, very quick, easy to do. If you want the free instruction sheet or the cheat sheet, you can download these on the following website. And hope you've enjoyed that little painting. See you soon.